All right, we can begin. Tonight's topic is about ga'ava, about arrogance, haughtiness. We started several weeks a new series about the midot, about human nature, characteristics, strengths and weaknesses, which we all have. And it's important to keep in mind that even though these strengths and weaknesses perhaps even though it's possible that these strengths and weaknesses are with us from the very beginning, because we are born with certain traits and certain characteristics, either through the mazal, through our astrological sign. There are certain traits that we have inherited, perhaps. They're genetic. There are certain things that we pick up. We learn, we studied. So throughout our life, our personality and individuality is being formed and molded by various factors. Nevertheless, it does not mean that we have no control whatsoever, that it is not possible to change, to refine, to improve. Nobody should ever claim that's the way he is and take me as I am. Even though the Navi does say that we cannot really change completely, entirely. We are what we are, but one can control himself. One does not have to display his weaknesses in the open. To control means to have a handle of, that we are the boss, that we are not the slave of the Yetzer, of our evil inclination, that we have the last say. That's what free will is all about. Free will means that we can make decisions. We can make decisions to just go with the flow, to be who we are really in our raw form and raw nature, or to make some modifications. So with proper guidance and with the strong will, we are able to change our lifestyle. We're able to be much better than what we really are, given our raw nature. Everyone has raw nature. Raw nature meaning that you were born in a certain way. No one is an angel when he's born. He is born with certain instincts, with certain desires, certain inclinations. And those inclinations, desires, or weaknesses become our challenges in life. People have their ups and downs, not in their mazal, in how much money they make, but even in their behavior, in how they react to situations, how they deal with their spouse, with their children, with neighbors. These are all our trials throughout our life, nisyonot as they're called in Hebrew. And some people have it more difficult than others because of their midot. The midot, their characteristics, may be so negative or so difficult to deal with that without the proper guidance, without Torah, without getting to know themselves, without making the decision to do something about it, they really lose control. Some of the midot are more apparent than others. Some are more disguised and hidden. Ga'ava is one of those that is hard to disguise. Kavod, which we spoke about last week, the pursuit of honor, is a little bit easier to disguise. But even so, in the end, most midot, if no effort is made whatsoever to control them, to refine them, they come out in the open. Gava, arrogance, is one of the most dangerous midot of all. It is also one of the most ugliest, as you will soon see. The Balei Musar, the rabbis who composed various books on morals and ethics, have said it very, very clearly in different words, that this midah is avi avot hatum'ah. It is the parent of other terrible midot. It contains the most impurities of all. It leads to other terrible midot. Midot that are very, very low. So the parent, or the shoresh, the root of many other midot that we will be speaking about throughout the year, originate from Gava. Gava has a lot to do with the manifestation of other midot as well. As it is brought down in one of the Sifrei Musar, that if you want to identify this midah, if you want to see it, you want to recognize, you can see some of its side effects, if we can call them so, in hakpada and kaas. Hakpada means those who are very strict and demanding, those who are very angry or temperamental. Having those midot by themselves does not mean that the person is a gaftan, that he's arrogant, person who gets angry frequently, person who is a kabdan. These are negative midot in their own right. They're bad by themselves. But for them to be manifested, to be makpid, to be demanding and strict, to get your way, or to be upset and angry at things that happen, the root of them, of these two midot, is gava. In other words, there's some degree of gava in that person that allows these other midot to manifest themselves. It does not make him a gaftan, it does not make him a very arrogant person necessarily, but there's various levels, there's various degrees in this particular midah. An individual who therefore is very demanding and strict, gets upset, will be very, very distant from something called sovlanut, tolerance. He will not be tolerant of people. He will not be patient with them. And of course, that is a very important and beautiful midah to possess, to be tolerant of people, because after all, we're all different. We can't change people, right? So we have to learn to live with the differences amongst people. And in order to succeed in any relationship, we have to recognize that. And I spoke a lot about that when we gave the series about astrology. People are different. And it's not that one is better than the other. All the 12 signs are good, each one in their own way. We all have weaknesses and we have strengths. The trick is to learn how to live with these differences. If we recognize them and we understand that it's not a person's fault completely not, partially yes, because partially, after all, we need to work. We need to try to discipline ourselves. But it's not completely one's fault because he is the way he is. That's just the way he is, he or she. So savlanut and sovlanut especially, patience and tolerance, is a very, very important if one wants to succeed in dealing with any situation. There are some tough situations, there are some tough people out there, and you want to have hopefully a good relationship with as many people as possible. So you have to cultivate tolerance. Tolerance meaning accepting people for what they are. So one who has ga'ava, of course, is going to have a more difficult time with tolerance. This particular midah does not only bring about other poor qualities, but it also tends to eventually, it may lead one to commit all kinds of sins. It may lead him to be rodef achar kesef. It may lead him to want to pursue money because it needs to feed his arrogance. There's some addictions, there's some midot that are fed by certain things. Just like people who are addicted to drugs and alcohol may come to take other people's money to feed this addiction. So ga'ava, in a sense, is not being fed by money, but as a result of one having that, he may want to continue to be in power, to be what he thinks he is, and that may lead him to commit all sorts of transgressions, including stealing from others. If it's a ga'ava, or where he thinks so highly of himself that he's so handsome, for example, it may lead to znut, to prostitution, where he may do some immoral act as a result of his ga'ava in his beauty. It may lead him to be mistarir. Mistarir means to try to be controlling or abusive of others because he thinks so highly of himself in some other way. As I'm going to explain soon, there are various kinds of ga'ava. So this one midah is not only the parent of many other very negative and poor midot, it could also lead one to commit all kinds of transgressions. As the rabbis tell us that there are various averot, or various things, midot, behavior patterns that bring about sin. The first one is hirhur. Hirhur avera, thinking about the wrong things, thinking about doing something. Rabbis warn us, be careful not to think about it, because that is the seed that you're planting that will lead to the sin eventually. It begins by a thought. You haven't done anything just by thinking about it. But the thoughts are very, very serious, the rabbis tell us. Hirurei avera kashin me'avera, because that's where it all begins. So you have to try to block those thoughts. You have to remove the negative thoughts because they represent the seed. So the first one that brings about or can bring about the sin and is serious is called hirurei avera, the thoughts. The other one is mockery, letzanut. People who are not serious about life, people who are not serious about the Torah. Therefore, they will not be serious about any rebuke, any musar. Letzanim. Letzanim in modern Hebrew is clowns. But the word letz in Mishlei and elsewhere is more associated with people who mock, who make fun of others. Of course, they're like clowns, but it's much more serious than that. These are people who don't care, people who are not serious. And this attitude is very dangerous because it can cool people off. When people make fun of you, when they ridicule you, when they belittle something, it can have an effect of cooling off people's excitement, which they may have had to do a good mitzvah, and all of a sudden this person is making fun of their effort, and they may lose interest. So letzanut, that midah, which we eventually we'll talk about separately, mockery, taking life not too seriously, is also a very serious midah, not a good midah, not a good characteristic. The third one is the one we're talking about tonight, and that is gasut haruach, as it's called, gasut haruach or gava. As a result of this midah, one also eventually can come to do wrong things because of it. Number 4 is achzaryut, cruelty, one who's cruel and is not compassionate, not considerate. That will, of course, give him a hard time with certain mitzvot. Number 5 is batala. Batala means being at home and doing nothing, killing time, not being occupied with something productive. This is called batala. Rabbis warn us, be careful to always be doing something. Never stay home and do nothing. Do something. Be productive, not only to contribute to society, not only so you can stay fit and healthy. That's not the idea here. The idea of batala is because a person is going to go crazy. A person is going to try to fill his time somehow, and it may be filled with the wrong things. Boredom leads to all sorts of wrong ideas, imagination, and eventually to sin, chas v'shalom. The rabbis knew very well the psychology of the human being, and they knew that this is very unhealthy for a person to just be home doing nothing. The Torah, therefore, encourages us to always, even when we're older, to always learn Torah. You were married once upon a time, unfortunately something happened to the spouse. Remarry when you're older. Don't stay at home, don't be by yourself. It's not just for company. It's the healthy thing, it's the right thing. It protects the man from sin. Never be by yourself and never just do nothing. Be occupied with something. Number 7, the next one is sinat chinam, is not having an interest in your fellow Jew, which is called baseless hatred. Otherwise, they say in this country, minding your own business. Minding your own business, what's wrong with that? No, there is something wrong with it. Judaism does not believe in minding your own business. We are all responsible for each other. We do take an interest. We do want to know what is going on with our fellow Jew's life. If there's anything that we can do to help him, perhaps. Not to be nosy. We're not talking about being nosy. That's always no good. For that, we should mind our own business. Don't be nosy. But if there's something that we can do, something that we can help, obviously we want to do it. So sinat chinam is the opposite of that. It's a baseless hatred. That means we don't care. We don't want to have anything to do with somebody else. We don't care whether he does well or not. And we've spoken a lot about this baseless hatred. It's not hatred for something specific. It's just a general lack of interest in somebody else's well-being. And the last one is ayn hara. Ayn hara does not necessarily mean only the evil eye, which you're all familiar with, that we don't obviously want to get it from anybody, the evil eye. When we speak about ayn hara here, we're talking about somebody who is not happy for other people. It's not envy. It's not jealousy. Jealousy is when you want to have something that somebody else has. Ayn ra means that you don't want him to have what he has, even if you have it. You're not happy for someone else. People who just don't, as we say here, lo mefargenim, are not happy for others. That's a terrible midah. So this midah, along with the other ones that I mentioned, are examples that the rabbis tell us can lead to all sorts of other negative midot or negative actions. But we're going to focus much more on gava than the other midot. B'ezrat Hashem, we'll speak about each one separately. Gava is terrible, not only because of what it is and what it does and what it can cause. It is also one of the most difficult midot to do teshuvah on. One of the most difficult characteristics to correct, to actually make any changes. Rabbis tell us whoever has this midah in an exaggerated manner, he's a real gaftan, shochech mashu choteh. He will forget his sins. He will not readily admit his mistakes. Therefore, it will therefore become more difficult for him to correct. If he doesn't admit it, doesn't remember, they tell a lot of people when they go to court, just tell the judge you don't recall. If you're asked something and you don't want to admit it, you don't recall. Well, when it comes to teshuvah, we can't do that because Hashem does recall. Hashem knows exactly what we did. We can't fake it. We can't lie to Him. But as we will soon see, the gaftan, in some ways, does lie to himself. He's in denial. Or he simply forgets what he has done. And because of that, he has a hard time doing teshuvah. Now, this individual who's a gaftan does not receive too much assistance from above. Usually people who want to do teshuvah and make an effort, take the first steps, we have a tradition that says very clearly Hashem will help them. Just take the first step and I will help you. The gaftan, because he never takes the first step, Hashem never helps him. I said before that he almost doesn't get any help because there are some times where Hashem does knock on his door. And we'll talk about that later. But usually a gaftan, a real gaftan, a man who's very, very arrogant, does not receive any assistance. Hashem really hates this individual who's so arrogant. It is, again, a very, very difficult midah, a very dangerous midah. And as you will soon see, Hashem very much doesn't want to have anything to do with him, does not listen to his prayers, does not look at him, does not consider him, does not help him with teshuvah. And that is why he's almost lost completely. Not completely, exactly, because nobody's ever lost completely. But he has a much more difficult time than other people doing teshuvah. The simplest explanation of why this individual may never do complete teshuvah is because he will not easily listen to what other people have to say. He thinks he knows better. He thinks they don't know what they're talking about. He thinks of himself higher or more intelligent than them. And who are they to tell me? So even bepashtut, on a simplistic level, without even saying that Hashem doesn't get involved, on a simplistic level, this man may not readily listen to what other people have to say. And because of that, he won't do teshuvah. There's different kinds of gava, different kinds of arrogance. One is with the physical body. If you ever get a chance to learn the Sefer Orchot Tzadikim, it's a beautiful Sefer, one of the classic Sefarim on Musar. It has, as a first shah, the first gate, first midah that he speaks about is gava. And there he distinguishes between the two types of gava, one with the physical body, and the other one with the chokhmah and the ma'alot. Chokhmah means because he's intelligent, because he has certain ma'alot, certain accomplishments, or certain good qualities. And then there's the guf. The gava of the guf, of the physical body, can be with the way one walks, with one's eyes, with one's ears, with one's clothing, with one's the way one eats. What does that mean, gava, in these areas? You can tell if a person is arrogant by the way he eats and drinks. In other words, he may drink something that others will take 2 or 3 sips. He does it in one gulp. It is a very not nice and not refined way to drink or eat. It shows something about him. So that's not being arrogant through the food necessarily, but it's a form of arrogance that can be seen at the time of eating or drinking. When I say gava with the eyes, it doesn't mean that he shows off his eyes. It means that he looks down at people. He uses his eyes in the wrong way. The gava is not in his speech and his mannerisms, it's with the movement of his eyes. Same thing with the ears. Gava with the ears does not mean that he's showing off his ears. It just means that he's using the ears in an arrogant way. For example, not listening to the plight of the poor. The poor man asks him, begs him for some money, and he ignores him. That gava is happening through the ears. In other words, he's not listening. He doesn't want to hear about it. And of course, the bigud, he has to wear the most expensive suit because he wants to show off, because he wants to look, special, even though he's not special. So that is already a gava in how he dresses. And then there's the gava of the alicha, of how he walks. If you ever get a chance to read chapter 3 of Yeshayahu, Hanavi, the prophet Yeshayahu, where he describes how the girls, the young women of Yerushalayim were punished because of the way they walked. They wanted to impress the authorities, whether it was the Jews or it was even the non-Jews who were already occupying that city, with how they walked and how they looked. And of course, Hashem punished them severely because of their walk. That walk was a form of gava, or a form of arrogance, of thinking highly about yourself. In this case, their looks that they wanted to show off. So they were punished for that. The Gemara brings a story of the daughter of Rab Hanina, who did something similar in how she walked she was very careful because she once heard a comment by one of the goyim, look at this beautiful maiden, how she walks, how her walking is so beautiful. And ever since she heard that comment, she was always very, very careful to make sure that her walk is nice and draws attention. Drawing attention, that's something not modest, definitely not for a Jewish girl. And eventually her punishment was that she was thrown into a brothel of prostitutes. A Jewish girl, the daughter of a big rabbi, how does she come there? Why does she end up in such a place? But obviously everything is min hashamayim, everything is midah keneged midah, measure for measure. She was not modest, she was not snuah, she was not careful in her behavior, in what she did. And obviously min hashamayim, they were very strict with her because of who she was, the family that she came from. The Torah is very, very, very adamant about controlling this midah, being very careful with this midah. And it makes mention of the prohibition against assimilating to the ways of the goyim. The prohibition against assimilating to the ways of the goyim is obvious. You don't want to learn from them. You don't want to be like them. You don't want to eventually intermarry with them. That's what the Torah is talking about. Don't follow their traditions. Don't do as they do. Don't believe in what they believe, because you want to stay away from them. And of course, a lot of what they do and believe is nonsense anyway. But it's not just the nonsense. You don't want to come too close to them, too close for comfort. The other idea behind that prohibition, however, is the Torah wants us to be very careful that we don't emulate the ways of the goyim, so that we should not acquire their midot. Eventually, if you do as they do, you absorb their mentality, their philosophy, their way of life. So it's not just a tradition, it's not just some belief or some idea. It's becoming like them in their behavior, doing what they do, going to their games, associating with them and eating what they eat, just becoming a goy. So here we have a prohibition that is also referring to the danger of eventually behaving like a goy, having the midot of a goy, which of course are not pure. So we have so far the gava of the physical body. And I mentioned earlier that the second gava can also occur when someone feels that he's greater, smarter, possesses some knowledge or some talent that other people do not have. That's called a gava in chokhmah and in ma'alot. As a result of this person thinking of himself like that, it's easier for him, unfortunately, to look down at others who are not as smart as him, not as capable as him. He praises himself, does not necessarily praise others. An individual who always thinks highly of himself will always take credit for what he did. What's wrong with that? Is there anything wrong with taking credit? The main problem with taking credit is not just the gava, Misha machzik tova le'atzmo, the rabbis say, whoever takes credit just for himself, he's forgetting that the one who really helped him achieve whatever it is Hashem. That's where the danger begins. That's where gava is so dangerous. Because little by little, a person who takes credit for everything for himself, whether he was a soldier at war, an Air Force pilot, regardless of what his accomplishment was, something great. If he does not give credit to the boss, to Kadosh Baruch Hu, then little by little he moves away and stops believing in the Almighty. He stops believing that the source of all his blessings and success is Kadosh Baruch Hu. That is why this is very serious, very dangerous. Somebody, of course, who takes credit for himself will never make an effort to be toreach for kavod shamayim, for the honor of Hashem. He's more egocentric. He's more concerned about his own credit, about his own reputation, his own success. So he's not going to be as interested and will not be as eager to be toreach. Toreach means to make an effort to do something lichvot shamayim, for the sake of Hashem. And as I mentioned earlier, because he takes credit for himself, because he's so into himself, he will not admit the truth. He will not admit his mistakes. After all, he thinks so highly of himself that he's so knowledgeable. Somebody else is making the mistake. And this could spoil an otherwise good relationship in a marriage. Husband and wife may be compatible. They may be just fine. But the guy has a problem. He has such a big ego. He's a gaftan. He's so arrogant. Made a mistake. He can't say, I'm sorry. There are some people that do not know or cannot bring themselves to say the words, I am sorry. 3 words. So difficult for them. Even though they know that they made a mistake. But they can't bring themselves. And I'm sure all of you know people like that. Why don't you just say, I'm sorry? Well, first they blame the other person for the mistake. It's not them. And for whatever reason, they always have an excuse. It's very difficult for them to admit their mistakes. Somebody who's like this, somebody who's having a hard time admitting his mistakes, who thinks highly of himself and looks down on others, when he sees other people making a mistake, he will be happy they made a mistake. That is another terrible midah that the rabbis talk about. Mishe sameach b'michshol chavero, mishe mitkabed biklono, whoever is happy for his friend's embarrassment, he's happy for his friend's mistakes. He made a big boo-boo, as we say it in English, and he's all smiles, he's all happy. That's terrible. It's ugly. Children laugh when somebody slips on the floor. They sometimes intentionally put a banana peel, right? That's a game. But even so, that's a very nasty game. It's not nice to see other people fall. It's not nice to be happy, to just, take it in stride, like nothing happened here. On the contrary, you should feel bad for somebody, especially another Jew where we are responsible for them. If there's anything we can do to help them, here, this man or woman has demonstrated the opposite midah. Instead of being considerate, they're actually happy. They're overjoyed that this guy lost his job, made a mistake, failed an exam. And where is all these midot, or where is all this kind of thinking coming from? From gahava, because he thinks highly of himself. He thinks that he's better, he's smarter. And this somehow justifies it. This somehow makes him feel good because he knew all along that guy was nothing. Right? So these are, you're seeing right now, more or less, you're getting a better picture of what this ga'ava does to the man, how it is seen on the outside, what it leads to, and how serious it is. One of perhaps the only midot that people really are disgusted with, other people who are disgusted, is with someone who has ga'ava. Rabbis tell us that a man who has ga'ava, afilu lanchei beto lo mikabel. Even his own family members are disgusted with him. Nobody likes him. Everybody hates his guts. In other words, in the end, this man who's really thinking so highly of himself, that is his downfall. This midah will eventually bring his downfall. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what kind of a downfall. But the immediate downfall that is very clear is that he cannot really, or he should not really feel that superior, because in reality, everybody looks down at him. Everybody thinks that this midah is ugly. I mean, it's so obvious. It's noticeable. Nobody likes him. Hashem hates him. His own family members do not like him. The Torah, in recognizing that there's always a potential for people to become gaftanim, even if they were not born like that, even if they were not like that when they were young, the potential always exists there, as I explained last week with kavod. There are people who have kavod or want to pursue this kavod, this being honored from the very beginning. Others who only have that problem once they reach a high position. They become prime ministers, they become presidents. Now, they don't want to go down. They want to be re-elected. So obviously people who have gotten themselves into a position of kavod, of honor, have a harder time running away from it. As opposed to those who don't have it, but they would like to have it. It's easier for them to control. With ga'ava, the Torah recognizes that the potential exists, likewise, that a person can eventually develop this. Who? A king. The Torah therefore warns the king, listen, when you become king, be careful. Do not become arrogant. Be careful that your heart should not become arrogant over your brothers just because of your high position. So imagine if the Torah is warning the king, Kol Sheken, the more so an ordinary man who's not in a high position of some sort, that he obviously should be careful with arrogance. Torah goes on to say that the potential for arrogance exists also when one becomes wealthy. When your heart grows arrogant or haughty, you may forget God. You may forget that He is the source of your blessings. People become comfortable. When the Jewish nation has become very, very comfortable, as the Midrash says will be the case right before Mashiach comes, when the standard of living will rise, people will be wealthy. They will have 3 cars, 2 homes, not maybe now, this year, because people are losing everything, right? But at the times when people do have, they may forget. They may become arrogant and become distant from Hashem. So that is another possibility. The potential exists for wealth and comfort to bring one to become very, very arrogant and eventually forget about his commitment to mitzvot. The Midrash, I believe, says that is exactly what happened to Dor HaMabul and to Sdom ve'Amorah. 2 incidents that are recorded in the Torah. There were various incidents, but these 2 in particular, that it was because of their comfort level, that Hashem has given them so much abundance. Dor HaMabul, the generation of the flood, and the inhabitants of Sdom ve'Amorah. The land was so fertile. If you go today to Sdom ve'Amorah, all you see is desert and a salty Dead Sea. That is not the way it was in the very beginning. It was very fertile land. And if you want to see how fertile it was, there are some spots, one of them called En Gedi. That is where you can see how that area was well irrigated, fertile. It was a very good place to live. And Hashem completely destroyed it because of the sins of the inhabitants of that area. How did they come to that? Because they had so much good. So the Midrash says the good that they received brought them to this. Now, you may ask, of course, then why does Hashem give so much bounty, so much good, so much abundance? Obviously, Hashem is good. Hashem is loving. Hashem wants us to have a good life, an easy life. But we have to be careful not to misuse it. Not to misuse it for the wrong things. Hashem, by giving us more wealth in this generation before Mashiach, does it for what reason? He does so that we can repair the sinat chinam, the baseless hatred, by helping our fellow Jew, by helping rebuild Eretz Israel with the money from America. Where is the money coming to rebuild Israel if not from America? So all the goodness that Hashem has given this generation before Mashiach, this wealth, is to be used for good things. But there is always that danger, the potential that a person will become a gaftan. He will become arrogant. And he will think so highly of himself, so comfortable, and use it for the wrong things. That danger always exists. So the Torah therefore warns us various times and emphasizes that these things can lead us to forget our connection with Hashem. So the bottom line with this midah of gava is that it's the antithesis. Does everybody here know what the word antithesis means? Or antithesis, maybe? I'm not sure how they pronounce it. It's the opposite. It's the opposite or the contrary idea of what the Torah represents, of what the Torah wants us to be like. Gava is the exact opposite. The Torah preaches to be humble, to be subservient to Hashem, to be kind-hearted, right? All these midot, this is what the Torah preaches. This is what the Torah wants us to be like. And here comes along this one midah and can destroy all of that. So it's the opposite, the antithesis of what the Torah is trying to teach us. Because it's the antithesis of the Torah, you will find scattered through many Gemarot, Zohar, and Midrashim, a lot of advice on how to deal with it, the dangers that lie in the path of the Bal Gava, and how to recognize it, of course. Rabbis tell us that even if somebody is a Talmid Chacham and has learned a lot of Torah, if he continues to be a Bal Gava, lo yinakeh midina shel Gehenom, he will never be cleansed of the judgment of Gehenom. They make a point to remind the individual that no matter how good you are in other areas, even if you know Torah like Moshe Rabbeinu, just remember, this is a terrible midah and no excuse, especially if you've learned Torah. You have no excuse to continue to be that way. Another Gemara that says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says about an arrogant man, I cannot live with him in this world together. What does that mean? Hashem cannot live with him? Because wherever the Bal Gava is, wherever he shows himself, the rabbis use the term dochek raglei shekhinah. It's like he's moving away or pushing away the Shekhinah. Because he says, I'm here. It's me. Nothing else. I'm on top. So that kind of attitude, that kind of behavior tends to move away the Shekhinah. Shekhinah doesn't want to be here. This guy thinks he's great. He's the boss. He's everything. So Hashem says, I cannot be wherever he is. And the Shekhinah therefore never resides in this individual. He can be a very learned man. He can be a man of many mitzvot and accomplishments. The Shekhinah will not be with him. Will definitely not be in his home. It moves away from him. Cannot live together with him. And that is why the rabbis consider him as though he's kofer, as though he denies the existence of God. Because how could you think of yourself so highly when you know there's somebody above you, when you know there's somebody greater than you? How could you even show off? How could you even have any of this midah in the face of Hashem? It doesn't belong there. So by a person behaving himself in such a way, it's like he's kofer. It's like at that moment at least, he's denying the existence of Hashem, chas v'shalom. And that is why the Pasuk says, To'avat Hashem, kol gevalev. Anybody who's an arrogant man is an abomination in the eyes of Hashem. Hashem hates this individual. As we mentioned earlier, he's hated by everyone, but even Hashem does not want to have anything to do with him. Many of you perhaps remember the Midrash of why Hashem gave the Torah in Har Sinai. Why was the mountain of Sinai chosen of all the mountains in the area? Hashem chose the lower mountain, not the higher mountain. The Torah is about to be given. Why does Hashem choose the lower mountain? Just because it's lower, it's humble? It's much deeper than that. In order for the Torah to make an impression on an individual, in order for him to actually want to lead his life by it, it has to be that he has some degree of humbleness. Where do we know that from? So the rabbis say it this way. Torah is compared to water. Just like water will always search the lower place, it will go from a high spot to a low spot, the Torah will only enter will only have an impact on those who are low. Torah being like water will only go to those who are low. If a person thinks highly of himself, the Torah will never get to him. And that is another explanation of what the Pasuk says in Torah, Lo b'shamayim hi. The Torah is not in the heaven. The simple meaning of that Pasuk, that the Torah is not in the heaven, means that you don't have to go too far to learn Torah. Ki karov elecha davar me'od. It's very close to you. Just open up a book and read it, learn it. It's not so difficult to be Jewish. Lo b'shamayim, it's not in the heavens that you have to go search for it who knows where. That's a simple interpretation. But the other interpretation is Lo b'shamayim hi. You will not find Torah with those people who think that their head is in the heavens, in the sky. People who think very high of themselves, the Torah can never get to them. Even though they become knowledgeable and they know things by heart, that's just raw knowledge. That has not have any influence whatsoever on him. The Torah can therefore only penetrate those who are humbler in nature. That is why the Gemara says that one of the simanim of gasut haruach ze aniyut b'Torah. If you come to a community and you wonder why there's not that much Torah, it's because of arrogance. Why? When people are arrogant, they may think they already know everything. And they may not ask questions. If something arises, some question, you need to ask a rabbi, a selech harav. You need to be honest and say, I don't know the answer to this question. There are many things that we don't know. So we need to ask. People who don't ask, people who think they know everything, that comes from arrogance. Therefore, they won't be Torah. They will be stuck on a level which is nothing. Not too much Torah. Another Gemara that says something very similar is Mirsherabu, Schichei Halev, Itrabu HaMachloket. Ever since there was an increase in the people who are Schichei Halev is another term used for those who think highly of themselves, those who are arrogant. Ever since there's been an increase in the people who are arrogant, there's been an increase in Machloket, in division and infighting amongst the Jews. Why? Because people think they know better, that their shita, their method, their opinion, their halacha, their interpretation is the correct one. Then that leads to machloket. So as a result of an increase in the arrogance, you have also an increase in machloket. And I think I may have mentioned that last week too. There's also a problem with the pursuit of kavod. Remember, kavod and gava are somewhat similar but different. People wanting to have the kavod, people wanted to be in charge, people wanted to have the control, the honor, the name. That leads to machloket and sinat chinam too, baseless hatred. So here you have ga'ava, because people think more about themselves than about somebody else, leading to machloket and division, unfortunately. This particular midah, ga'ava, in reality, does belong in one place. Anybody know where does this midah belong? Who should have ga'ava? The only one who has gava and may have gava is Hashem. This midah really belongs to Hashem. Ki ga'o ga'a, as we say in Az Yashir. Hashem became great over the Egyptians when he went after them and drowned them, right? Ga'ava, even though it's not the same, of course, Hashem's ga'ava as our ga'ava, but that ga'ava in Hashem is proper because he is the greatest. He is supreme. So if anything, that midah belongs with Hashem, as the rabbis explained. He's the only one who can show that, and he does show it in his ways. He proves the point that he's in charge. So since this midah only really belongs to Hashem, when somebody borrows that midah from Hashem for himself, it is counterproductive. As the pasuk says, a very, very powerful pasuk, the people who have this midah should remember for the rest of their life. If they remember this pasuk, this one pasuk, I think it will help them a lot. Ga'avat adam tashpilenu. The arrogance of man will eventually bring him down. What does it mean, bring him down? In two ways. Bring him down is that people won't look up to him like he really wants to, because they will be upset at him, disgusted by him. So this midah is actually his downfall. This midah, where he thinks so highly and superior, will actually bring him down in people's eyes. But the other more simple idea behind this pasuk that Shlomo HaMelech is reminding us is Ga'avat Adam Tashpilenu. Anybody who's been arrogant in some way, through his money, through his clothing, that gava that he has will eventually bring him down. This man who has gava, sometime during his life, he's going to come crashing down. Shlomo Melech, therefore, and I'm going to tell you some other pesukim that say the same idea. An arrogant man will eventually come crashing down during his lifetime. It is true that reward and punishment are mostly reserved for the world to come. And not much is seen necessarily in this world. And that's for a variety of reasons. Sometimes Hashem pushes something off. He doesn't go after the wicked because the man has children, the man has a wife, and they don't deserve the repercussions. Hashem sometimes pushes it off because that man has chutavot, he has the merit of a father or a grandfather. He may have performed a mitzvah when he was a young man. All sorts of reasons why Hashem may push off or not even go after somebody who committed a crime. Reward and punishment for the most part are reserved for the world to come. We don't see in this world too much of what happens to the righteous or to the wicked because it would also interfere with free will. If everything would be so obvious and clear, you just passed the red light, you get an infraction. In other words, a ticket, or you go to jail. If things would be so clear, then we would obviously be compelled to do the right thing or not to do the wrong thing. So Hashem does not always, or at least not immediately, reward or punish. With Ga'ava, there's certain things that one will have. One will suffer the consequences in this world. One of them is especially the Midah Ga'ava. I'm not talking about certain activities or actions per se, which also will have consequences. This is not an action. This is a Midah. This is something that the person thinks of himself. He did not act upon it necessarily. He just thinks or behaves in a certain way. No particular action. This type of midah will eventually bring him down. So a gaftan will come crashing down at some point of his life. How will he come crashing down? So the rabbis tell us, "Boto davar shu mitgae bo," in that which he is arrogant, that is what's going to eventually come after him. If it's money, he will eventually lose his money. If it's beauty, he might get scarred, chas v'shalom. His face may get burnt. Something may happen to his physical body as a result of gava, because he was thought so highly or so. I'm not going to mention a name, but there was a non-Jew who several years ago was involved in a major horse accident and became, I think it's pronounced in English, a quadriplegic. Yeah, quadriplegic. You know what that means? Completely paralyzed. Completely paralyzed. He may have thought he was Superman. Yeah, he may have thought he was who knows what. Yeah, I'll show you with one little fall, all it was a little fall, that you're no longer a Superman. Now, I'm not. We can never judge anybody. Chas v'shalom. We don't know anything. But when something happens to an individual like that, it's for some reason. Nothing happens by chance. Nothing is coincidence. Right? Everything is Hashemayim. We may not figure out what it is, but we may be able to guess. Sometimes it could be obvious. Because this midah, ga'ava, eventually goes after the individual, and with whatever he was arrogant, that in that area he will fall. Rabbis tell us, Kol ha'mityaher im chacham chochmato mistaleket mimeno. In other words, if he was arrogant through his wisdom, he will eventually forget his Torah, his learning. Rabbis tell us also that one of the ways that he will fall, one of the ways that he will hopefully realize his mistake, will be when people actually behave towards him in a very demeaning way. As the Gemara tells us the following example. Whoever is arrogant is compared to a nevela. What's the connection, nevela? Nevela is a carcass that stinks. Anybody that goes through a dead animal, what does he do immediately? He puts his hand to his nose. So anybody going through or having anything to do with this arrogant man will eventually do this. Block his nose. Ugh, can't take him. So this man, of course, will fall in many ways. One way he will fall amongst people. They won't tolerate him. They won't be able to be around him. They'll hate him. And in another way, of course, that something will happen in his life as a result of his gava. One of my favorite pesukim, however, is a pasuk that not too many people are familiar with. And if you read it, you may not even know what he's saying. Shlomo Melech says, Lifnei shever gaon. Anybody can figure this one out? We spoke about it when we learned Mishlei several years ago. Lifnei shever, before a fall, there is gaon. Gaon means loftiness. Before a fall, loftiness. What does that have to do with? Shlomo Melech is trying to tell us and remind us that if somebody had fallen, crashing down, you can assume many times it was because before the crash he had gaon in him. He had arrogance in him. Imagine somebody saying, oh, this will never happen to me. Oh, really? Lifnei shever, if he ever does come crashing down, it could be that one day before, 1 month before, and I don't want to mention names because you may know somebody in the world, in the big world, who had this, who was very proud of himself, thinking he's so healthy that he can live on for many more years to come. And before you know it, he's in a coma already for the past few years, without mentioning names. A big guy. There was a story with one of the Rothschilds. One of the Rothschilds said, I know one thing, he said. I have so much money, I will never die of hunger. You know, a guy may have lawsuits. People may steal some of the money. But hunger? Never. He got once upon a time, it happened that he was in a safe, in a big safe, we have walk-in closets. He had a walk-in safe. And he locked himself in by mistake. He got locked out. And nobody could hear his bangs. And he realized what was happening to him, that he was going to die of hunger. Apparently there were some holes and he could breathe. How do we know his story? He didn't even have a pen. He pricked his skin and with a little bit of the blood of his finger wrote a note. I realize that this is coming to me as a punishment, Mishamayim, for having once said that I will never die of hunger. Yeah. How do you express yourself that way? It's only arrogance. Who says something like that? Anything can happen. In Hebrew, there's a term used in the medical field called dom lev. Dom lev means the heart just stops. No heart attack, no, just stops. It's beating 24 hours a day for B'ezrat Hashem for 120 years. It could one day it could just stop. Well, it could stop at the age of 32. 30, boom, it stopped. Who does he think he is? Nothing will ever happen. I mean, something can easily happen. Dom lev, just the heart stopped. No warning, no prior warning even. Person has to be very careful. If we look through our history, our more past history, who were the biggest big shots that suffered? Paro. He thought it was the big shot. Well, he showed him who's in control. Hashem showed him who's the real boss. Another one, besides Haman, yeah. Haman we spoke about last week. Let's not pick on him too much. No, we mentioned Haman last week. Goliath was about 10 foot tall. Approximately, give or take.
Maybe more.
Maybe, yeah. We don't know exactly. Yeah, it wasn't the biggest giant, but he was taller than most people by a lot. I figured about 10 feet. And the way he was covered with the armor, his experience, comes a little young man with a slingshot, David HaMelech, and brings this monster down just with a slingshot. And when he saw David HaMelech, that's what the Jews are sending me. That's the soldier they're sending to fight me. What do you think? I'm a dog? And of course, David HaMelech, of course, tells him off. Who do you think you are? You're going out against Hashem. And of course, David HaMelech had the help of Hashem to be able to accomplish that. But this just proves the point that this guy, because of his gava, he lost it. Same thing with Sancheriv. Same thing with Nebuchadnezzar. Just look throughout history. All the big shots, they fell. They completely came crashing down. More recent history. What about the Titanic? Do you know why the Titanic came down? Because they said it was unsinkable. Never. Oh yeah? Unsinkable? I'll show you. It doesn't have to make too many rounds in the world, and its maiden voyage. The first time it's come, it didn't go too far. An iceberg. Titanic. Then we have Nazism, the Nazis. Nazis? What do they want? How do they come to Gava? Anybody know? Did they have Gava? Were they arrogant? Of course they were, because they thought their race was superior to other races. That's what Gava is. So their race was a race of Gava, Amalek, of looking down at others. They're not human beings. We can kill them, get rid of them, gypsies and all, and Jews or whatever. They're the pure race. So Hashem showed them too. Unfortunately, it took a couple years until they lost, and that was all min hashamayim. But still, they fell. The Gava at the end falls, comes crashing down. And soon, who do you think is going to fall? Edom, Malchut Edom, the entire empire that belongs to Esav, which is scattered, but part of it is in this country. It has to come down. Hashem says, I will bring him down from above. Even if you put your nest among the highest places, I will bring you down. That was Yaakov's dream. Yaakov's dream with the ladders. He sees angels, which are really ministers of the nations, going up and then eventually coming down. These are the empires. They go up, they come down. Spain went up, came down. Persia went up. Everybody goes up, comes down. He sees Edom going up and not coming down. He's afraid. Hashem says, don't worry, these guys I take down personally myself. In the end of days, they're going to come crashing down. So that's what we should be expecting very, very soon. The Malchut Edom is going to come crashing down. And what comes crashing down with Malchut Edom? Money. Because money has become an idol, an elila kesef. So therefore, these things do come tumbling down because Hashem wants to prove that all these gava that they've had in what they were trying to do led them nowhere. Just more war, conquest. So many people, do you know that almost 1 billion people are hungry? Hungry, don't have what to eat, and they're sending all these things into space to see if there's any water on the moon. So many people are hungry. It's all gava, to conquer space. And that's why I once said that perhaps the Challenger was also destroyed. What kind of a name, Challenger? To challenge. That's what the Dor HaPalaga did, to challenge Hashem with the big tower that they were trying to build. I don't know for sure. I don't know. We don't know anything for sure. But the name says a lot about something. A lot of what people try to do that is linked to Gava eventually comes crashing down. Hashem teaches them a lesson. Okay, in the next few minutes, we have to, as usual, deal with this problem and how to correct it, how to try to better understand it, and what to do about it. Rabbis tell us that some gava is necessary. Everybody has to have 1/64th, an eighth of an eighth of gava. And that is related to self-esteem. It is related to the fact that Ki b'tselem Elokim nivra Adam, after all, the human being is special. He's the crown of creation. He has a neshama. He's not just an animal. And that little bit of gava that he has to have is healthy. It's important. Otherwise, he may commit suicide if he doesn't know his true value. So a little bit, just a little 1/64th, just a little bit is healthy, is necessary. The problem begins when it is exaggerated. When it is exaggerated, the rabbis tell us, Kol hamityaher hu balmum. If you see a person who has this midah in an exaggerated form, it's a defect. Just like there are physical defects in the body, this is a spiritual defect in a sense. It's a midah which is so defective that it means that this individual has a defect. It's a mum. It's a terrible mum. One way to understand that this is a mum, a defect, a terrible defect, is with a negat sara'at. There were various kinds of leprosy in the Torah, various kinds of forms and shapes and colors, depending what the individual did to deserve the leprosy. The rabbis tell us that the negat called se'et was because of gava. Se'et, which means to rise, was a result of an individual being arrogant. And because of that, Hashem would, for some reason, insinuate to him, let him know, inform him that what you were doing is ugly, not right. So he would get a warning, a se'et, right? A form of leprosy that hopefully if he would cleanse himself and do proper teshuvah, it would leave him. But to better understand this mum, we have to turn to Sefer Mesilat Yesharim, as it is in English called the Path of the Just. It's available online. Mesilat Yesharim. Beautiful book, powerful book, Musar, how to work on oneself step by step. And he talks briefly about Ga'ava. He says, Ga'ava really, in essence, is Ivaron HaSechel. The mind is blind. It's a blindness. We just said it's a mum. What kind of a mum? It's a blindness of the sechel. But why is it a blindness? It's a blindness because a human being essentially is blind to his own faults. Adam karov le'atzmo. A human being is blind to his own fault. He doesn't always see his own faults so readily. So this individual who has gava, of course, is taking it several steps further. He's completely blind. He's not just a little blind. We all have maybe a little bit of this, but this man, for some reason, has gotten a large dose of it, where he doesn't see any faults, and as a result of that, he's only seeing good in himself, and therefore thinks highly of himself in some way more than others. In the Sefer Michtav Eliyahu, he adds an additional detail, and he says like this: an individual having gava really is lacking something else. He's lacking in his pnimiyut internally emunah. In other words, even though a person may have emunah, faith in Hashem, if ga'ava is present, that means internally there's a lack of emunah. The emunah is not really there. But wait a minute, what if he's doing all the avodat Hashem and he prays and he puts on tefillin and he keeps mitzvot? So he says, this Rabbi Elyahu Kin says something very interesting. People can do all these mitzvot very nicely, but all of that is chitzoni. It's external. It's not internally. They don't feel that way. They're not doing it with all their heart. So when a person's emunah internally is lacking, when it's not strong, whatever he does do, it's all on external. It's on the surface. It's to impress people or to do it as he does it as a routine. It's not internal. In other words, there's some lack of emunah there, which is allowing this, of course, ga'ava to be there. I wanted just to add another detail, and that is with what the Gemara says about the various bigdei kehuna. The Kohen Gadol had various bigadim, right? 8 garments. Besides doing the service with these garments, they were each intended to be mechaper on something else. They used to atone for something else. On Yom Kippur, Yom Kippurim, each beged would atone for something else. Along with the service of Yom Kippur, along with the prayer of Yom Kippur, every garment atones for something. And atonement means to remove any vestige of it amongst the Jewish people. Because if something is left there, it could be a problem for the future. It's going to go after them, going to be around, going to continue to be a problem. So we have to remove, not just to forgive them, we have to remove it from the air. We have to cleanse the air. What was the mitznefet for? The mitznefet, the turban, the hat of the Kohen Gadol was to be mechaper al gasut haruach, on arrogance. So that question is, of course, what does that have to do with arrogance? So the Gemara says, well, the reason it has to do with arrogance is yavo davar shebemakom gavoa v'chaper al davar shebegavoa. Let that which is sitting on top come and atone for that which is on top or thinks he's on top. I wanted to add on my own, I wanted to add something else. What does the mitznefet, the hat, have to do with gava? How does it atone? What does it do for arrogance? Perhaps an additional idea is as follows. A Jew is always told to keep his hat on, his kippah on. We've always covered our hair, the men at least. Today it's with a kippah, once it was with a different kind of a cover. The head of the Jew was always covered. So there should be emat shamayim, yirat shamayim on us all the time. A Jew today is not allowed to walk daled amot, 4 cubits, 6 to 8 feet, cannot walk without his head covered. You cannot make berachot and pray without your head covered. It shows that a person has no yirat shamayim. A head being covered means that we know that there's somebody above us. that we respect and we have awe and reverence for. That is what the kippah is for. Going with a head uncovered means we're the top. The head being the most important part of the body, the one that contains the brain, may think so highly of itself because it's so important. There's somebody above that, somebody that is watching over us. Kadosh Baruch Hu. So a person, a Jew, by covering his head, is making a powerful statement. I believe in Hashem, I have respect for Him, I have reverence for Him. So the mitznefet perhaps is in some ways to atone for the lack of Yirat Shamayim, which brings about Gava. If a person would really have emunah, as we said earlier, Yirat Shamayim, he would fear Hashem, be cognizant of Hashem's presence at him at all time, then he would not have the Gava. What happens, of course, when the person has this defect, he is misled by the Yetzer. By being blinded, he's being misled by the Yetzer. How does the Yetzer mislead him? Very simple. What you're doing is something good. After all, if you do this in a certain way, people will come to like you. If you show yourself to be more intelligent than they are, they will come to ask you questions. If you dress in a certain way, they will have more respect for you. All kinds of excuses. I mean, we can go on and on and on in ways that the Yetzer Hara tries to convince the arrogant man that what he's actually doing is good. He's being misled by the Yetzer. So because of this blindness in him, he doesn't see things properly. He actually thinks that what he's doing is okay. There's nothing wrong with it. So the question is, how can we get rid of the Gava? The Baal Shem Tov, before he passed away, wanted to appoint a successor. Baal Shem Tov, over 250 years ago. And he told his students, the one that will give the proper answer to this question is the successor. What was the question? Is it possible to get rid of Gava? Or how is it possible to get rid of arrogance? That was the question. Whoever gives the proper answer to this question is the successor to the Baal Shem Tov. When they came to the Magid of Mezrich, Reb Dovi Mezrich, and they placed the question to him, how do you get rid of Gava? He says it's impossible. It's impossible to completely eradicate Gava because when a person is standing on a mountain, he does not know that he's on a mountain. Those were his words. Therefore, it's not possible. Then what can we do? Pray. Pray what David HaMelech said, Al tevi'eni regel Gava. Those were the words he said. Pray that Gava should never come to me. That Gava should not affect me. That I should not be misled by Gava. Pray. So, on a very simple level, we already have the answer to the question. It cannot be possibly completely eradicated. Gava is there to some extent. But we said before in the very beginning, I started off saying we can control it. We can have it under the tight control. So that's going to be the question for the next 3-4 minutes, is how do we take control over this very serious midah? So there's various pieces of advice. The number one advice that one needs to always go by is that when it comes to correcting a midah, but especially gava, it's not enough to think about it. Oh, it's not right, it's not healthy, it's not good. Machshava alone will not defeat the gava. It requires gedarim, it requires fences, it requires actual disciplinary actions to fence off this gava. Okay, so how do we go about the fencing? If it's gava in bigud, that people are very arrogant about the way they look and dress, very simple. The Rambam says, take this to the other extreme for a while, and then go back to the middle road. In other words, if we're always used to wearing fancy clothes, Gucci, right? All kinds of things like that, wear the simplest clothes possible. Simplest. If they sell them in the 99-cent store, buy it there. Right? Cheap as can be. Simple. It doesn't say dirty. It doesn't say with stains. No. You can't make a Hilul Hashem. You have to dress clean, nice. Simplest clothing, cheapest clothing. Eventually, after you got it under control, that you're no longer looking to show off with the clothes, then you bring it back to the normal way. You first have to go to the extreme, the Rambam says. You can't go to the middle. You first, to eliminate it, you got to go to the extreme, to the other end, and then you come back to the middle. If it's with speech, the way a person talks, the way he presents himself, then he should handle himself in the following way. His speech should always be benachat, quietly, gently, calmly. He should allow for people to, if people say something insulting, he should keep quiet and not answer back. he should try to sit in a spot which is not the most respectable spot, if it's in the shul, in the back instead of the front. Anything that happens to him that is insulting or belittling, he should tolerate it and accept it. So this demeanor that he had before, this superiority complex, this gava, will hopefully not die down completely, but be tuned down a little bit by doing something that is opposite to it. It will cool him off, right? He will hear his insults and he will not respond. He will accept it. He will talk in a gentle way, not in a loud way. These are exercises that can help a person who has this problem. There's a very important pasuk in Echa that basically says when a person sees something terrible happening to him, why should he complain? Ma yitonen gever chai al chata'av. Mipi elyon lo tetzeh haraot. The Navi says, why should a person ever complain for something bad happening to him? Somebody yelled at you, insulted you. It happened for a reason. As David HaMelech tells the gentleman next to him, Hashem omer lo kalel. Shimi ben Gera, when he cursed him, David HaMelech said, I understand why he did it. It's coming mishamayim. I deserve, my ears had to hear those insults. It doesn't mean he's going to go scot-free. He's going to get punished for what he did for insulting a king. But Hashem omer lo kalel, when a person is involved in a very, very difficult situation where he's insulted, embarrassed, something terrible happening, he has to remember it's for some reason that he deserves this, that he has to go through this. A Bal Gava, therefore, his emunah can be strengthened by understanding this point, that it's happening, whatever is happening to him, is there for a reason. If this individual does not do anything to work on himself, as I said earlier, something will happen. Min hashamayim, something will happen. Rabbis tell us that one of the things that happens to people today that there's no leprosy is that they lose their money. Gaftanim, arrogant people lose money. A lot of them will lose their money. They thought so highly of themselves. They thought that nothing can happen to them. They thought that they can make the best investment. A lot of these individuals eventually lose the money. And that loss is a way for Hashem to awaken them. They on their own are not awakening themselves. There's no se'et and sapahad. There are other Hazram sicknesses, which we can't talk about right now because we don't know why all these sicknesses come for. But we do know that one of the ways that these people come crashing down is by a tremendous loss of money. Last but not least, a person who's really has this problem and he's finally admits it, because we said before he may not admit it. So one who does admit it can do the following. Besides training himself to, depending on where the gava is, to try to neutralize it, whether it's with his clothing or his speech, besides all of that, there's one thought that can really help him. Rabbi tells in Pirkei Avot, if you really want to do yourself a favor and stay away from sin, just remember where you come from and where you're headed. You come from a tipas roha. You come from a nothing, from a drop. You're headed to the grave 6 feet under. And you will become worms. The body will decompose. Nothing will be left of you. I saw a saying in Latin that they used to put in front of I think it was a carriage, or where people who just won a war and came back victorious from some big accomplishment, they put on their wagon, put a little sign that said in Latin, Sic transit gloria mundi, which means, just remember that very soon all this glory is going to be taken away from you. It won't last forever. Before you know it, you're gone. It disappears. Glory does not last forever. After all, look back to all those people who were greater than you in the past. They're gone. Who remembers them? So a person who thinks about these ideas, it could help him. And there was another Rothschild who did exactly that. Remember the Rothschild died of hunger? Well, there was another guy who was very religious and had a room, a private room that he didn't let anybody in, where he meditated a few minutes every day. There was one big rabbi who was curious. I got to see this room. This is a room where even the maid is not allowed to enter. What's going on in that room? As long as you don't tell anybody what you see there, while I'm alive, I'll let you in. Deal? Deal. Takes him in. The rabbi sees in the middle of the room a big coffin, a candle, a book of Tehillim, shrouds, and a talit. And Mr. Rothschild tells the rabbi, every day I come in here, and I see the coffin, I see the talit that they will cover me with, then bury me with. I see the tachrichim, the shrouds, which they will dress me with. I see the ner neshama that they will light for me, the tehillim that they will say for me after I leave this world. And once I leave that room, I'm a totally different man. I'm completely humble. This is a banker. This is a millionaire. He needed this exercise, this discipline to bring him down a little bit from what he was. It helped him. I don't know how long it lasted, for a couple hours or a couple days, but it helped. This is a man doing the right thing. Those who don't have this exercise, the Midrash says there's something else you can do. Just remember, if you ever become arrogant, hayitush kadmecha, the insect was created before you. Insects were created before us. In other words, if you have a problem with that, just remember that too. People don't realize that before they know it, they're gone. They don't realize that life is so transitory, that all this shame, all this fame and glory is really worthless. Doesn't accomplish anything. If people would bring themselves to think a little bit more, meditate about life, meditate about our purpose here, they wouldn't have that much of a problem with almost any midah, especially with gava. Just like to finish with the last point, very interesting point, and that is about Mashiach. Rabbis tell us, En ben David ba ad shichlu gasei haruach miYisrael. Mashiach will not come until all the arrogant people are completely gone. You know where there's a lot of arrogant people? In the Knesset. There's a lot of arrogant people all over. They're from the Erev Rav. They're going to be all gone very soon. Why do the arrogant people have to be gone before Mashiach is going to come? So I'd like to explain it as follows. It is brought down in the Sefarim, I don't remember exactly where, that once kapara, when he brings a korban, a sacrifice, when he does teshuvah, is not complete until when? Until he feels remorse, until he feels that he feels bad about what he did. Right? Until he's able to break that spirit of ga'ava in him. Remorse, regret, feeling the pain for having done something wrong is what helps the teshuvah. So the kapara is not complete until the ga'ava is broken. The ga'ava is broken with regret, with remorse, with feeling the pain for having done something wrong. So it could be that one of the ideas or one of the things that needs to happen before Mashiach comes is that Kadosh Baruch Hu is not only going to teach the world a lesson that he's the boss, which is, by the way, what's going to happen very soon. Everybody's going to wake up one day to realize, oh, there is Elokim Bashamayim. He's been there all around. Besides all of that, Ga'ava has to be broken down. People have to become humbler. Teshuvah is not completely possible if people think so highly of themselves and of their accomplishments. We have the best army and the best air force. Oy vavoy for somebody to think like that. Because before you know it, Hashem can teach them a lesson, a painful lesson. You don't have the best air force. Missiles can bring down planes too, even the best planes. So instead of learning the hard way, HaKadosh Baruch Hu would prefer that we should do teshuvah the proper way. But for those who don't, he's going to have them coming crashing down. So all the balei ga'ava will be removed because that is part of the kapara, the atonement process, in order for Mashiach to come. So we have something to be happy about. This is a very difficult time to be living in for everything that is happening, but this is also an exciting time to be living in. Because B'ezrat Hashem, by seeing all the signs that everything is crumbling around us, this is the most powerful indication that B'ezrat Hashem Mashiach is around the corner. Thank you.
If anybody would like to receive the free weekly Torah email, you sign up the email address.
I don't know why.